In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet. Today I'm going to be talking about a movie that came out in 1963 and was directed by none other than Francis Ford Coppola. This was pretty early on in his career, obviously. I mostly know him for his version of Dracula, which I could go on and on and on about how much I love the attention to detail and how much I hate Keanu Reeves' awful British accent in that movie, but we're not here to talk about that movie. We are here to talk about Dementia 13. Dementia 13 is about this girl who has married into this sort of aristocratic Irish family and is hoping to get in on the will of the mom before she dies and try to change it because it donates all the money to charity, and she can't do that if her husband is dead and they're out on a boat and he dies of a heart attack. That's not a spoiler because it happens before the opening credits even start. Even as he's like dying of a heart attack, he's like, "Ha, you don't get anything." So she hides his body and tries to pretend he's still alive. We sort of at first think she's the only sort of devious, nasty part of this whole scenario, but she goes over to stay with the family and try to arrange things so it works for her. There's this possibility that there's a ghost story going on. Every character has something of a dark side. Nothing quite as it seems. Things get slightly more devious. Bodies start piling up, and it's very spooky and atmospheric, but also very dark and brutal, and it's great. As I said, it's directed by Francis Ford Coppola, but it's also produced by Roger Corman for American International Pictures. I'm pretty sure Roger Corman mentored Coppola early on. He actually directed, I think, segments of The Terror with Boris Karloff, which I will probably be reviewing somewhere down the line. This movie was absolutely Coppola's brainchild. He directed it and he also wrote the script, and I enjoyed the story for this movie. It's sort of set up as another one of those murder mysteries where people are after the will of this rich family, but it sort of takes a turn into being something else, and it's still kind of that kind of murder mystery, but it takes sort of a more dark, twisted turn than that. Again, we've got this ghost story aspect, and one element of that is that there's this little girl who has drowned in the lake. It's the youngest daughter of the mother in this family. Her name is Kathleen, and she drowned years and years ago. It was this huge tragedy, and there's sort of this presence of her, even if she never really appears in the movie. There's sort of this ghostly presence of her throughout the movie. She's kind of what's driving the characters to do horrible things. And there's this big picture of her up on the wall, which looms over everything, and very reminiscent of the Edgar Allan Poe pictures that Roger Corman would have been making for AIP at this time. The mother in particular is very, very obsessed with the girl. She reenacts the funeral ceremony for the girl every year, and it kind of goes the same way every time. They stand over the grave with their black umbrellas and put flowers on the grave, and then she passes out. And that happens every year. It has to be like the same people who were there from the beginning. It has to be reenacted the exact same way. So there's this sort of morbid obsession there. We do find out how Kathleen died. It was not an accident. We find out who killed her. Well, it wasn't it's a little nebulous, but we find out later on that someone actually did have a hand in her death. She didn't just accidentally drown by herself. We find that out pretty early on, and when you do, it's kind of like, oh, whoa. I don't want to spoil that for you, because that's one of the most twisted, delightfully morbid things about the movie. After this, we start getting some kills. They feel like something out of a giallo film, almost. We know who's doing it, basically, but still, it's kind of this unseen killer, and the kills for their time are very, very violent. It's not like as gory as things would get, but there is blood, and there is on-screen dismemberment in this film. The effects are not like the most convincing thing in the world. You know that head is not real, but at the same time, it's good. It knows how to build atmosphere and suspense before its kills as well, which I liked. Overall, the movie effectively blends a classic murder mystery with gothic horror and this sort of ghostly atmosphere, and mixes that also with elements of a giallo and really the seeds of what would become a slasher. It really does feel like a proto-slasher. There's a lot of elements of movies like Psycho from 3 years prior, and you can see elements of movies to come like Halloween. The characters are, at first, like, none of them are likable, because the first two we see are this woman, Louise, and her soon-to-be late husband, and both of them are just greedy bastards and not likable. They're both just after the money, and they clearly don't like each other. When we're following Louise, she is not a likable person, but there's this morbid fascination with what she's doing. It's sort of just looking at what she's trying to get away with. When we meet the mother character, she's very, very dramatic and a little bit over the top with her sort of despair and obsession with her daughter, and I couldn't entirely take her seriously, but she wasn't laughable either. She was just kind of melodramatic, and I enjoyed her melodrama. All the characters in this movie really feel three-dimensional. None of them feel like flat characters per se. The only exception to that would be the gardener or groundskeeper. He's always going around hunting rabbits, but we honestly don't see that much of him. He's really more of a background character, so we don't really need him fleshed out that much, but all the characters that we're really focused on really do feel dimensional. All of them have a definite dark side, but also this sympathetic side to them, and they're all well acted, although they do kind of lack subtlety sometimes. Who needs subtlety? I like subtlety sometimes, but sometimes I just want things to be over the top and melodramatic, and this has a bit of both, and does both well, I think. My only problem with the characters in this movie would be we've got Luis and then this other guy, fiance, and then these other two guys who are brothers, and honestly I couldn't tell Luis and Kay, the other girl, and those two guys apart sometimes, which is a problem because they are very essential to the plot. Both girls and both guys just look so similar. Both girls have blonde hair and a similar cut, and both guys wear similar suits and have a similar hairstyle as well. I just couldn't tell them apart for the most part. They didn't feel distinctive, which was a problem in a lot of scenes, because I was just like, wait, what? I thought that character was doing this thing, now they're over there. Oh no, that's a different character. I kind of figured out who was who by the end, but it was still confusing to me. Visuals wise, this movie makes really good use of space and shadow to create atmosphere. In the nighttime scenes, most of the screen is going to be black aside from the essential set pieces and characters. By doing that, it creates this sense of space that might not actually be there, but it's kind of minimalist, but also very eerie looking and very stylish, and I liked that. The camera angles that are used are very stylish and very intentional. There's lots of sort of good perspective shots, over the shoulder shots, good use of camera movement. Because we've got this lake or pond, I forget which it is, but it's there and it's essential because drowning. There is really beautiful underwater cinematography as well, which looks really good. This movie, while it does feel low budget in some ways, in other ways it hides it really well because the movie looks fantastic. In regards to sets, the interiors are very, because we've got this mansion, which is in Ireland, by the way. They make a point to tell you that it's in Ireland, and there's sort of this element of like Irish folklore-ness to the ghost aspect. It's not very prominent, but it's there. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But the interior of this big castle is very, very gorgeous and elegant looking, and the costumes aren't anything special either, but they're very pretty and elegant as well, and I liked that. It adds to the very gothic old dark house, Edgar Allan Poe-ish, almost sort of what would become the vibe of a movie like Crimson Peak later on. It adds to that kind of vibe in the movie. Outside-wise, at night, everything's gonna be sort of draped in shadow and making good use of space, like I said before, but otherwise, when the lights are on, there's like one scene in the daytime at an airport at the beginning of the movie that's just kind of bland, but otherwise we've got the exterior of the castle, which is also really pretty. It really does feel like this beautiful, old-fashioned area in Ireland, and it's honestly gorgeous. All around visuals wise, this movie is fantastic. Another element I really liked was that there is this scene with, I think it is Kathleen's room, which has kind of been sealed off, and Luis goes in there and there are these creepy little wind-up toys everywhere that are very cool. One of them's like a clown, and I think it doesn't have legs. It's just sort of walking around on its arms. And the other one is this little monkey that just turns its head and it has a little stump and an axe, and it just chops. They make it very clear that there's foreshadowing there. They make very good use of this just creepy little monkey with an axe wind-up toy, which is very unsettling, and I love that creepy little bit of the movie. It's one of my favorite things about the movie, honestly, in terms of just creepy little details. The music for this is really good. The opening of the movie, before we actually hear the score, is dead silent. It's just the two out on the boat discussing the will, and then him having the heart attack and dying and getting pushed into the water. He's just got this 50s, 60s rock and roll playing on the radio, and she's just like, I wish you would turn off that dreadful music, and he just turns it up. I have no idea what song it is, but just this 50s, 60s ranged rock pop song playing on the radio while this guy is dying. And I really like sort of that juxtaposition of just casual, good times background music while something horrific is happening. That always adds to the creepiness and almost the realism of a scene for me. As soon as he goes into the water, we get the opening titles, which are these really beautiful painted designs. I really liked those as well, even though they aren't there for long. And the score has this traditional spookiness to it, but it really feels a lot more standout and a lot more well-matched to the movie, and it really does feel like it takes it a step further with the darkness, and it feels just a step above a lot of horror scores from this time period, especially in this use of a harpsichord, which just adds this extra eeriness to it that I really, really liked. One of the best examples of the way it syncs up the music is in the scene where Luis goes into the room and sees the little axe monkey, because as it's just casually chopping away, it'll do it like 3 times on screen, and every time the axe goes down, there will just be this huge strike of the instruments in the orchestra, just this huge orchestra strike every time the axe comes down, and it's just like, oh yeah, they're trying to tell us something here, and it was cool. I enjoyed that. I don't think I have anything else to say before I get into the spoilers. So overall, this movie is very atmospheric and very dark and creepy for its time, and it really does blend the elements of gothic horror, a murder mystery, and sort of this proto-giallo or slasher into a story really, really well. And I think there is no excuse for you not to check out this movie. Again, it's not the greatest movie I've seen in the world, but none of these movies are the greatest I've seen in the world. But this movie is really visually great, and the storytelling is great as well. So I highly recommend this if you're a fan of horror at all. Please check out Dementia 13 if you can. That is the spoiler-free section of my review of Dementia 13. Here are the spoilers. Pretty early on, we find out that one of these brothers... God, somebody's texting me right now. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop texting me. God. Stop texting me. Stop. I think he's done. Anyway, we find out that one of the guys, I forget his name, the other guy's name is Richard, it's not him, was like trying to take one of Kathleen's toys from her when he was a kid and pushed her into the lake and drowned her involuntarily, and that has scarred him forever. Like, we just see it while he's sitting by the lake in a flashback, like really early on in the movie, and you're just like, whoa, whoa. And then there's even more creepy little foreshadowing while he's talking to Luis by the lake. There's just an axe sitting there in a tree, and he just goes and he's just talking about what happened to Kathleen as he's there with the axe, and then he just rams it into the tree really fast. And then shortly after that, Luis has taken these dolls and has found some way to put them at the bottom of the lake so they'll rise up when the mother is out there and can see them and can be like, oh my god, my dead daughter is trying to tell me something. I have no idea how that works, but she does it, and it ends up working. While she's down there, she sees what she believes to be the dead body of Kathleen, but it doesn't look like it's rotted. It looks fresh. But before we can figure out what the hell's going on there, she comes up out of the water, and the guy is there, and he's got an axe, and he just starts chopping into her. And we've been following her as our main character for the entirety of the movie up until this point, so it really is this Janet Leigh and Psycho moment where you're just like, wait, that's the main character, you can't do that, wait, stop, no, don't do that, no. But she's dead. So there we have it. It just takes a far more disturbing turn than you thought it was gonna. And yeah, I've seen this movie before, but I didn't remember it that well, and I didn't know it turned into a proto-slasher, but it does, and it's great. And then shortly after that, there's a part where we've got the groundskeeper guy crawling through the brush at night hunting for rabbits, and he looks up, and there's the axe, and it comes down and it cleaves his head off right there on screen. Again, the effects, not totally convincing, but decapitation. Yeah, it was well done and very dark and very proto-slasher, and I liked it. Then we've got another moment, because also right before that, the groundskeeper guy had also seen in a different location the oddly fresh looking corpse of Kathleen, and then got his head lopped off. And then there's another scene where the mom has seen the dolls and he's like, my little girl wants me to bring her tiara. And she goes to the shed and brings this tiara with her and puts it on the doll. Then the axe-wielding maniac starts hacking through the walls of the shed, and she starts freaking out, and she almost dies, but she ends up passing out on the lawn where everyone can come to her aid first. And it's a narrow miss, but it's very intense. And then near the end, we've got this family doctor who's sort of become a detective who has been sort of trying to figure out what's been going on, and our killer has tried to pin it on the late Louise and say she was just trying to steal the family tiara and kill my mom before she could stop her. And the guy's like, I don't think she was, I don't think she even knew about the family Tyara. And he says Tyara, which I cannot take seriously, but I don't know. Is that an alternate pronunciation? I don't know. But it's not really significant, but I just found it amusing. He's been the family doctor for a long time, so he's heard about these dreams that one of the family members has been having and talks to the guy about his really morbid dreams and is trying to, because he's engaged to Kay, in the middle of their conversation, he just starts singing, and it's this nursery rhyme, and I'm not going to try to sing it because I don't remember the tune. It might as well be Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but it's not, but it's Fishy Fishy in the Brook, Daddy Caught You on a Hook, and yeah, some nice little foreshadowing there as well. That is one of the creepy moments that I always remember most vividly in my mind. And then on the wedding night, we see him pondering it, and he's just like on a hook, and he just looks up and runs to the slaughterhouse where they're keeping all of their meat, and sure enough, Luis's body is hanging up there as well, and it's not as gruesome as it could be in some other movies, but it's very gnarly and dark, and I wasn't ready for that the first time I saw it, but it was dark and it was awesome. At the very end, he also sees this corpse, this fresh corpse, which is actually a mannequin of Kathleen that he's been putting in all these spots, and we don't entirely know why, but the doctor puts it out in the open where everyone can see it, and the crowd just starts gathering around it. Kay tries to touch it, and the guy just runs out screaming, "Don't touch her!" with an axe, and tries to hit Kay with it and misses very narrowly, and then gets whacked himself and dies via the doctor's hand, I believe. There's also been, when they drained the lake, they found this tombstone that says "Forgive me, Kathleen" on it, and they're like, you're the only like metal worker, stone worker guy here, and he's like, I'm a metal worker, not a stone worker, and he's like, you've done stone work before, and he's like, so has everyone in my family. But right as he dies, he just goes, "Forgive me, Kathleen," and dies. And the doctor sort of explains, he was using this mannequin as a stand-in for Kathleen, so he actually had something to protect, and if anyone got too close to it, he would kill them. So his guilt sort of twisted him into the maniac. And then at the very end of the movie, the actor who's playing the doctor just takes the axe and rams it into the face of the Kathleen dummy, and the credits play over that shot, and it's all kinds of perfectly dark. So a lot of these movies have sort of sappy, happy endings to them. This is not one of them. This one is wonderfully dark the whole way through. So if you want a good horror movie, and if you're a fan of horror of any streak, I think you will enjoy this. And if you're a Coppola fan, it should be interesting to see one of his earliest movies. So I absolutely recommend that everybody checks out Dementia 13. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!